neurotechnology is going to really impact our daily lives today and in the future in ways we cannot even imagine.
There seems to be something about the brain which almost philosophically seems like non-understandable.
You have to have the best science, but also, try to accelerate the market impact so that people can benefit. Because in the brain, you could be there forever.
Ana Maiques is the CEO and co-founder of Neuroelectrics, a European company developing innovative technologies to monitor and stimulate the brain to help people living with neurological diseases. She's widely recognized as one of Europe's most inspiring entrepreneurs. In 2014, she received the EU Prize for Women Innovators from the European Commission. And in 2015, Neuroelectrics was named Best Healthcare Startup by Wired UK magazine. Today, Ana Maiques joins us on the show to talk about the present and the future of neurotechnology. And to kick off, let's start with our first question. Ana, what's your wildest prediction for the future?
Thanks for the invite, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think that my wildest prediction, I think that neurotechnology is going to really impact our daily lives today and in the future in ways we cannot even imagine. I think that we are very active in the healthcare space or medical space, but I think that brain-computer interfaces, today we saw a release of a brain-computer interface in kind of a 3D virtual reality glasses. So I think that it's going to impact in ways that we cannot even imagine. No, it's like the new frontier of interaction with the brain.
Forgive me here, but the term sort of neurotechnology, what area is that? What kind of devices are we talking about here?
Well, I think you're talking about all kinds of devices, right? There is the very invasive part, like the DBS or really, the BCI, what Elon Musk is building with Neuralink, which is really implanted devices in your brain, right? For medical conditions such as, for example, Parkinson's, where you have a tremor. Now they implant an electrode in your brain and you stop trembling, right? But then there's also a new category or another category, which is non-invasive technologies to either monitor the brain or stimulate the brain. At our company, at Neuroelectrics, we have the pleasure of working in this non-invasive space, and we can do either monitoring or stimulating the brain. So I think that in general, the term neurotechnologies are those technologies that enable an interaction with the brain, either invasively or non-invasively.
So there are some things that you might undergo surgery and some things implanted and is there forever. And there are other things, the kind of devices that you're working on where you're kind of wearing something and it kind of monitors as well as sort of affecting your brain. Like, how does that work?
So, well, one of the beautiful things of working in neuroscience and neurotechnology is that we are very aware, the ones that we study the brain, that the brain is not only this biological chemical system, but it's also kind of a network connection. It's like a computer of electrical connections. Your heart also sends electrical activity in general your body, so does your brain. So our thesis is that in humankind, we've been very focused on developing, biological treatments for many brain disorders or diseases, but the brain is also electrical. So why don't we try to decode it and understand this network of connections and try with electricity, for example? Other people are doing infrared or sound to really alter, this circuitry through stimulating the brain, for example, with electricity. That's what we do.
In what way is electricity being used? Kind of conjures up images of kind of sci-fi movies where people are kind of electrocuted or something. Are we talking about sort of, sort of DC current? Are we talking about different types of frequencies?
Well, that's kind of one of the reasons why I think the field hasn't evolved. I think all these movies, somebody fly over the cuckoo nest, all these kind of, horror picture movies about electricity in the brain has created a completely, I think, super wrong image of these technologies. So I think that there is a lot on this awareness of what these diseases are and what can electricity do for them, right? And in our case, we have developed this amazing technology for the audience, which is this wireless technology. You can see that it's as small as a phone. I have it on the back of my head. It's wireless. So any of the electrodes that I'm wearing now can either monitor your brain, your electrical signals, also called electroencephalography, EEG, which can diagnose epilepsy or disorders of sleep or other neurological conditions, right? But the beauty is that any of these electrodes can inject electrical currents into the brain. And versus ECT or on implanted devices, these low currents can either excite or inhibit your neuron activity because you can inject positive currents or negative currents. And as you mentioned, they can be also direct currents, alternate currents, customized currents, so all sorts of different waves of electricity in the brain. But what we demonstrate at Neuroelectrics is, as, for example, 10 days, 20 minutes per day, we managed to reduce seizures in patients that don't respond to medication, 44%. So imagine patients that don't respond to medication, that they are refractory to meds, they continue to have seizures. The only alternative is surgery. And then you come with this non-invasive therapy, right, to really reduce the number of seizures they have. And they can do it at home.
It seems like there are a large number of different types of conditions that this can be helpful with, everything from sort of pain to depression, anxiety, like ADHD. Like what sort of things is it well suited for, and what sort of things does it not work for at all?
We are doing an FDA phase 3 registration trial with the FDA. Our results in the pilot were really good in Boston. So now we are out to finish this study that will have the results in Q2 26, so right around the corner. And we aim to become the first company in the world to go through the FDA with this new intervention. But we know, for example, that TMS, which is another version of electrical stimulation, but has to be done in the office. It has a big coil, and it requires to go every day to the hospital, whilst we can do it at home. It's approved for depression and for OCD. So our second indication is depression, because, following the targets in the brain of TMS, we also think this could be in mental health, a very interesting application. And then we are doing a small pilot on Alzheimer's, because thanks to some support from the European Union, because we know that in Alzheimer's, there is some 40 hertz gamma stimulation in the brain that some other companies are using for flickering lights. But we think with electricity, we can also improve the symptoms of Alzheimer's.
And when you sort of look through the kind of the life cycle almost of a condition, I mean, is this used for the sort of diagnosis? Is this used, as a treatment, where you kind of press a button and then you get a little bit better immediately, you get a little bit better slowly? Do you use it to kind of train people to kind of reorient their brain somehow? How's it kind of used?
This device can be used to diagnose, and for such, we are using it, for example, in emergency rooms or ICUs of hospitals, where normally you don't have an EEG available because it's very cumbersome, the technicians are not there, right? So our goal is to really have this rapid EEG present in different areas of the hospital. But I think that the beauty of the technology, you look kind of forward, is that you will send a patient home with a prescription, therapy, let's say for epilepsy or depression, and then before you stimulate them, you monitor their EEG and you put that information to our computational neuroscience model of the brain. We call that software NeuroTwin, and it's a very sophisticated platform that makes a digital twin of your brain in the cloud. And then with that data, we give you a personalized protocol in terms of how many electrodes and what kind of currents. And then we monitor your brain again and feed it into the model, right? So there is no other technology that allows you physiologically to gather your brain signals in real time and then stimulate and be able to really improve, your neurotwin and personalize in ways that it hasn't been really possible before. Because remember, you can take this home.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the kind of form factor, it's obviously something that looks a little bit more portable, a bit less crazy than these devices in the past. So is the sort of goal almost to turn it into something one day that people might wear for like a few hours a day? Or is it always designed to be kind of like a premium?
Our intervention is only 20 to 30 minutes per day, which means that I think that the form factor is really designed to use it at home, at the comfort of your home. So I think, there are ways to improve it, but we really believe that, we have a cover in the form of a shark, for kids, and we have some innovations, right? But I think that, we did a 35-patient study at home. They had to do this at home for 30 minutes. This was an FDA-ID pilot study, and we got 89% compliance, meaning that, these patients with depression, with the help of their caregivers, spouses, or children, managed to comply with the treatment 30 days on a row, 30 minutes, and they comply almost 90%. So I think that it's not as bad as it looks, in the sense that it's really easy to use.
Are there particular conditions that this is unbelievably effective at and are kind of likely to be the kind of the pioneering use cases that sort of make the kind of company a kind of household name?
Well, we really, really like epilepsy, right? Because, as I mentioned, the unmet need is huge. It's people that it's not referred to medication, they don't have a treatment, and the only alternative is surgery, which, by the way, many patients may not be able to go under, a surgical procedure. So we really like that because of the impact it has. And, the endpoints are very clear. Either you reduce the seizures or not. We have demonstrated that it's very safe. So we are very happy about epilepsy. But the second one, as you mentioned, is mental health. We are very worried about, the escalation in mental health, especially amongst adolescents and young adults, right? And I haven't seen a lot of progress in the development of new drugs, antidepressants, and, precisely for younger adults. I think that this could also be amazing, right? Because there are no drugs designed for young kids or young adults, right? So I think that this electrical stimulation paradigm and at home can help a lot of people in which drugs either don't work or they haven't been designed for this population.
There seems to be something about the brain which almost philosophically seems like non-understandable. To what extent are we working within science that we completely understand versus we have no idea what we're doing, but it kind of seems to work?
Well, definitely, we don't understand the brain. I mean, just think about 100 billion neurons communicating at the speed of light every second. And as I said, it's a network. It's not this image that people have of areas of the brain, like the Brockman areas and so on. It's really like a computer, connections and things, changing all the time. So the honest truth is that we don't really know how it works yet. And it's a really big question mark. So that's why I think that in our company, working with, my co-founder is a physicist and mathematician, right? Taking a very analytical, science-based look at this network and modeling it with the great AI tools. And, we've been using machine learning for years because there is no way we can, as humans, decode this brain without help of these kind of tools. So I think that with the eruption of AI, we are also opening a new window into really modeling the brain in ways that it hasn't been possible. And I think that, I don't know, I mean, there is a big question of what is consciousness and many questions that I'm not sure we'll ever have the answer, right? But I think that for certain diseases and for certain pathologies, we may hit at least some solutions for patients. Will we know exactly how it works? And I don't know. But as in many drugs, you just test that you're improving the effect and doing the best you can. I also think, I'm more of a business person. And I think that having this company with a business person and a scientist helps us also to say, okay, the science could be perfect, but, I have calls from people suffering every day. So at some point, you have to have the best science, but also try to accelerate the market impact so that people can benefit. Because in the brain, you could be there forever.
Yeah. It's I feel sometimes like on this show, every time someone mentions the word AI, like a buzzer should go off because it's sort of talked about so much. But in this instance, it does genuinely appear to be something that AI is unbelievably well suited for. Not least because the way it operates in some ways is a bit like how the brain operates. So can you go into a bit more information on sort of how you're using it and how long you've been using it for? Because it sounds like you've been using it for a while.
Well, I think that's forever. But I think that the way we are using it now is, remember, we have to build, Tom, in your case, a digital twin of your brain. And that requires getting, for example, an MRI and some kind of physical data from your brain to build a biophysical model of your brain. Your scalp thickness, your conductivity. I mean, your brain and my brain are different physically. So can we model that with all the imaging and data that we can get? Point number one. The second problem, which is more difficult, is can you physiologically model your brain? Can we make a twin of your brain, taking into account how your brain performs electrically? Like your peak of alpha maybe at 7 hertz and maybe mine at 10, right? So There are some particularities also in the way your brain electrophysiologically work. And then I think that's where you have to start to model the twin, and then all these computational tools help us to say, okay, if my target map is to inhibit a part of the brain here where the seizures are coming from, that's why we are dealing with focal epilepsy. If I need to make a guess for Tom, how many electrodes and what kind of current needs Tom so that I reduce, the electrical activity in that particular area. So that's where the computational models start to compute how many electrodes and what current makes it best for Tom and his brain to receive to help with the epilepsy. And that can also be extended more difficultly to depression. I mean, the problem with depression is that there is a lot of symptoms and a lot of things we call depression. But imagine one day where we can identify the networks or the circuits that are linked to you having anhedonia or motor dysfunction when you suffer depression. Maybe you can move my electrodes to just stimulate the circuitry that is more linked to your symptoms and maybe have a better chance more selectively to stimulate the right part of the brain. So that's kind of what we are trying to achieve. And I think it's more like precision psychiatry from kind of an electrical perspective.
I don't know whether you want to talk about it or not, but recently you raised quite a lot of money. What are your kind of plans for the next few years? Is there an intention to make this more of a kind of consumer product, roll it out so that you have a greater data set of people that are using it?
Well, I think that our biggest objective, and we are talking about a medical device company, a therapeutic company, so we are under a lot of regulation, both by the FDA and the European authorities. So I think that our main goal remains to make sure that our monitoring and stimulating devices hit, the patient via prescription by a neurologist or a psychiatrist. And I think it's our idea to really go, through epilepsy and depression. And as we build the evidence, bring more indications on neurology or psychiatry. I think down the line, once this therapy is kind of approved and tested, we can start to talk about prevention. It may come a day when we can probably use our stimulation devices as preventing, for example, for Alzheimer's, right? When you start to forget some things or your cognitive decline starts to show, maybe you can receive stimulation before, you develop this silent disease, and when you find out it's too late. But I think that for that, you need to establish the data and the validity of the long-term effects, right, of these kind of devices. I mean, what happens after 1, 2, or 3 years of using the device at home? Do you really improve? Do you rewire the brain? Do you cure diseases? We don't know. We know it's safe. We know it works. But 2, 3 years from now, we have to see that data and then say, wow, let's start in prevention so we can prevent all these patients from coming in. I just think that if you start consumer, like a lot of companies we've seen in the market, then it's very hard to jump into the clinical world. In a new intervention like this one, I feel safer starting in the medical field and then going down to prevention.
At the start of the show, you talked about this idea that this technology would be spread across our lives and it would allow us to do different things. Tell us more about that. Like, do you kind of see offshoots of this technology being used in different products? Can you imagine sort of sunglasses doing something that is very specific or kind of low energy or something like that?
Well, what is beautiful? I mean, we are a medical device company, but a lot of people approach us, especially like artists. Like we have a paper written with Refik Anadol, which is one of the best audiovisual artists in the world. And we monitor at MoMA the impact of the brain in the brain of his AI-generated sculptures. Beautiful. Now we're also talking to chefs, Michelin star chefs, that want to see the impact on food and their brain from a scientific perspective as well. We also did a concert with Peter Gabriel in which we tried to synchronize 2 drummers, see if 2 drummers playing in the band would have the same brain synchronization. I also think the combination with psychedelics is very interesting because, we can induce plasticity, and I think that's also an exciting area for the future. Things like that, I think we'll see maybe one day you'll go to a museum and as you have the experience, you're monitoring your brain and seeing if you feel you're reacting more to a work of art. So those kind of consumer applications on the monitoring side, I think we'll see more. What I'm not certain is on the stimulation side, whether we want to make people smarter or younger, or that I have a lot of ethical question marks about that, right? And as well as I do with the implanted devices that are going to consumer, right? Who is going to own the data? What is the neuroethics? I participate in a lot of neuroethical debate. Forget social media. Tapping directly into the brain is another dimension. I mean, the brain defines us as humans, right? So if you can change agency or identity with these devices or chip on the brain, I think, I don't know, the young people listening, they may be able to consent to have a chip in their brain. But to me, the question is what is going to happen to that data, especially if you lose the agency to be a human or to decide who's going to control that. I mean, I can decide not to have a mobile phone or a Facebook account or whatever, but once it's in your brain, how do you take the decision?
It's kind of amazing because it's kind of everything, really. I mean, when you think about the brain, it's everything from disease prevention, pain, depression, learning, memories, consciousness.
Enhancement.
You quite quickly end up talking about everything.
It's emotions. Is what makes us human. I mean, that's the beauty to work in the brain, but it's also the danger, right? That you want. And maybe I sound very naive, or maybe I'm old, but I think we have believed an object of social media instead of having technology of social media and so on at our service. So in a way, I don't want for neurotech to become that. I really want neurotech to help us humans evolve and not become the object or the target of the technology to make us do things or buy things or think in a particular way. So that's what I think I would like to see.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on. The use of technology and how we can use it to make people's lives kind of better, like happier and healthier, and how can it kind of make us get to a better place together seems to be the most important thing here. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Ana.